So the summer before my 8th grade year, which would have been 1991, my band director took a group of students to a drum corps international show. And one of the groups that was performing was doing the music of the Pat Metheny Group. And I had never heard of that band at the time. And on the way to the event, my band director played some of their music so we could know what we were in store for. It was the first time I ever heard the album Still Life Talking, and it just stopped me in my tracks, specifically the drumming on it. And that experience just led me down a path of listening to this guy that I'm getting to speak with today in whatever configuration he was playing in. And to me, I think he's probably one of the most diverse drummers that's ever sat behind a drum kit. He's a 7-time Grammy Award winner with the Pat Metheny Group, and he's played with everyone from Larry Coryell to Kurt Elling, Howard Levy, and his own projects like the Paul Wertico Trio. And he's also a very well-respected educator and clinician. Served on the faculty at Northwestern and is now at Roosevelt University in Chicago. As I was looking through his list of former students, it's a pretty impressive list, including my son's professor at LSU, Dr. Brett Dietz. So it's an honor to welcome Paul Wertico to the podcast. Hey, Paul, how are you?
Good, Brad. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being here today, man. It's a real honor to sit and have a conversation with you. I heard in an interview with you that your mom encouraged you to take up an instrument, but said, don't play the drums.
Yeah.
That's really funny to me. At some point, did she come around to that?
Well, it was just one of those things where, we moved to Cary, Illinois, and just about to enter the 6th grade. And, I always played on the desk and stuff, listening to AM radio. So I always loved the drums for whatever reason. And when we moved to Cary, I wasn't in any band. And so she wanted me to join the school band and take up an instrument, which was great. And I wanted to take up the drums, and that's what I ended up doing.
The same thing happened for me. I was about the same age and started playing. And when my son started playing percussion, I actually picked up the phone and called my mom and said, I want to just apologize for all of the hell that I probably put you through as a child, banging on things around the house. What was it about the drums that pulled you in?
I have no idea. I really don't. Like so much things in life, you just follow your muse, and you have no idea why you are what you are. You find out certain things later on about that there might have been an attraction to this or that, or the kind of food you like, but in general, I was always into trains, so the rhythm of the train, the direction. But this was all happening, say the Beatles had come out, say the mid to late 60s, and I'm talking about like 1966, moving to Cary around that time. So it wasn't that I was in love with Ringo or the drums or anything, but there was just something about maybe the physicality of it, the movement. I was always pretty physical. I was always been coordinated and things. But it just in general, I guess if you don't play an instrument and you're listening to AM radio at your desk doing your homework, if you don't play an instrument, you can't just break out a trumpet, or you can't just break out a clarinet.
Right.
So basically you have pencils that you can start bouncing on the table, and then you might get inspired, which I always did. You get some cans or some canisters, and the next thing you know, you're kind of playing faux drum sets. So I guess it was just a natural thing that luckily worked out.
Did you start, because I will say, and you probably heard this a lot over the years, but you have some of the most beautiful and just flowing technique of anyone, man. It's a pleasure to watch you play, because you seem so relaxed when you play. Did you gravitate towards traditional grip from the beginning? Were you a matched grip player? What was the evolution of that?
That's a great question. Thank you for the compliment. So when I did join the grade school band, my band director, Vern Pade, was a saxophone player. So he, as a grade school band director, you have to know all the instruments. So he showed me the drumsticks. And back then, everybody was playing traditional because that's just the way it was. And it's funny because once I got into like 7th and 8th grade, I remember being in the choir room one time and everyone was laughing at Ringo because he was playing matched grip. But a lot of the British drummers did play matched grip. Mm-hmm. So I actually played both evenly. But what's really funny about this is that I remember, okay, so I take these lessons, I get a drumstick and I get a pad, and I start learning music. And I remember to the day when all of a sudden I just could do a roll. I was just sitting there, and all of a sudden the mechanics just sort of happened. Now, what I practiced on when I got home was just pillows. So I didn't have a drum instructor. And in fact, later on, when I finally got a drum set as a graduation present from 8th grade, I asked my mom if I could take drum lessons, and she said, no, just do what you're doing. So my technique was all just self-taught, and it just came from just playing the pillows. And again, I guess the logic of your body, if you're able to read it, just makes sense, and you do what comes naturally. One reason I have this great technique in the finger control is just because there was no bounce on the pillow, so I had to do it using my hands and my fingers. And the other thing I just told Don Lombardi this when we did one of those Lombardi live interviews, that when I finally got a snare drum, I got a Slingerland snare drum. This is before I got a drum set. And so I started practicing that. This would have been in 7th grade, but I didn't have a drum set yet, but I would play along with records. The strainer on the snare drum would be one of those things where it kind of went like this, and it had a little flap that you would catch. So I actually went to my closet and got a metal coat hanger and fashioned it so it went around the snare strainer and around my left knee. So I was able to go like that just by moving my knee this way.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, one thing, even my daughter, my wife always say, I've always been inventive. I like making up stuff, creating stuff. I love to cook without recipes. I love to play music that's spontaneous. It's just one of the things I guess I've always felt comfortable with, just going into unknown territory and enjoying the adventure.
I had a drum teacher. I started taking private lessons in, I think, around 8th grade. Same kind of idea, where his assignment to me was to play on my leg above my knee. Same concept of playing with a pillow, in that there's no natural rebound from it, which really developed my back 3 fingers, which once you translate it over to a snare drum, it just makes everything so much easier.
That's a little more painful, obviously.
It hurt
a lot of times, yeah. So that's why they even have practice pads now you can put on your knee, on your leg to be able to do it.
Yeah.
But no, it also helps with brush technique, because, brushes, you can kind of get a bounce, but not really. So to get that even stroke on a bounce, you're actually helping it with your finger control.
Yeah. I mean, if you weren't taking lessons, I imagine, were you playing from any method books at that point? Were you just playing what was at school?
Well, I've always been sort of a collector of things. So I would buy certain books. Back then, you had the Haskell Haar book. You might have had stick control and things like that. And when I used books, I never would go through the book. I would look at like a page, maybe look at an exercise or two, and then just make up variations on that. So I was never one of those people that, has to go through all the exercises on every page of the book and then feel like I conquered the book. I always I like adventure. So I would just take something and go, okay, that's a cool pattern or a cool rhythm or a cool sticking. What can I do with that? And then just kind of run with it.
What were you listening to at this time?
Well, I did have a large record collection, because when I was 15, now I couldn't even drive yet. I was teaching at 3 music stores. My dad would drive me to these music stores. God knows what I was teaching. But one of the music stores in particular was in McHenry, Illinois, and it was a large record store too. So you walk in and there's all these new records, which I would buy. So I spent my money teaching on the record stores. So that's where I first got, Coliseum, or you'd get all kind of the rock records. You'd get the Nice, or you'd get these who is this, and you would just buy it and bring it home. And then I would play all the time. And back then, even though I had like a Victrola kind of thing for my records, I did play with AM radio a lot. So finally, when I got a drum set as a graduation present, I set it up and I had like an AM radio behind me. So there's no headphones or anything. And then I would just put on whatever was playing, the Kinks, the Hollies, the Beatles. And then I would just jam along with it. But rather than try to play what the drummer played, I would play around the music. I would play almost free and then catch things, and then so I never transcribed things back then. I was never really interested in trying to sound like someone else. It was just more my dance, because when I play, I think it's like dancing. Even though I'm not a dancer, it's a dance. And so I would just react to what the music made me feel when I played, and that kind of gave me that sense of flow and of natural movement and a forward motion, rather than being like a drummer playing a rudiment for their fill. And in fact, I hated the rudiments at first, because not that I couldn't play them. I just thought, like, what is this stuff? And then it wasn't until, a few years later that I all of a sudden went, oh, wow, this rudiment, that's when you break it up around the drums, that's a Art Blakey lick or a Ginger Baker lick or what all that. And even in Cary, there was a A&P grocery store that I would go to that would just carry records. And so that's when I'd go, Freak Out, Frank Zappa, never heard of him, buy it. Are You Experienced, Jimi Hendrix, I don't know, buy it. Cream especially. All of a sudden there's fresh Cream, and I look on the back and it goes, Ginger Baker, undoubtedly European's best drummer, took it. So I just bought everything, and jazz records too, the same. So and ethnic records. I just bought whatever I could, and I would just listen and practice all the time. So you're right about bugging your parents, but we lived in a home, luckily, because if I lived in an apartment or something like that, it would drove neighbors crazy for sure. But it was one of those things where it was all natural, not trying to copy anybody, just letting the music tell me what to play, which I still to this day tell my students, let the music play you, because then it's more of a natural thing. And if you do have technique, then you're able to express yourself. Just like if you have a vocabulary, depending on how big your vocabulary is, you can speak to a child, or you can speak to another professor. And the whole idea is to use the correct words to whoever you're talking to. But if you don't know those words, or if you don't know the meaning of those words, then you're going to sound like sort of an idiot. So the idea is to really work up your technique so that you can express yourself for what you're feeling and hearing and thinking about, and then just do it naturally. So it's just like talking.
I feel like I'm a sum of every record that I've ever listened to, and pulling a little bit. And again, like you're saying, not trying to copy them, but just trying to understand the flavor of what they're doing and then adapt it to, to who I am. I've noticed that behind the kit, it does, visually seem like you're dancing, in that it's not an elbow down motion or even a shoulder down motion. It's everything is mobile while you're playing.
Yeah, and some people might frown on that because some people say economy of motion to save energy, but for me that's more liberating because I'm not tiring. I mean, you can see me play like a 3-hour set. I don't sweat one bead. I'm not out of breath. It's totally effortless for me. And I like the motion of that because that's what I'm feeling. I'm feeling this. I'm not just feeling a note like this. I was, just teaching some drummers about reading. And, when we look at drum music, whether it's a whole note or a half note or a chord note or an eighth note or a 16th, it's just one note. It's a dink. Well, no, if you're playing another instrument, it's going to be a longer note. So why not make longer notes, even if it's still a dink hitting a snare drum? Why don't you make it feel like it's a longer note if that's what you're hearing? Because you're hearing phrasing. Otherwise I'd be talking all like this, and every note would be very short, unless I went like this and then with a symbol and just dictate when it'd be stupid. So the idea, you're talking through the instrument, and again, I'm 71. I'm in the best shape. I go and do 100 push-ups in the morning and all this stuff. It's effortless for me. And the drumming has kept me healthy. And I think if I played like this, people get tendinitis from repetitive motion. So the way I play, there is no repetitive motion. It's always a different thing. It's always just something is relieving the other tendons and fingers as I'm doing this other strike.
Yeah, the moment that the stick touches the drum is only one part of the entire motion instead of that being the result of everything else. Yeah.
Right. Now, one thing you do have to be careful, and I guess this is something I am proud of, is say with Metheny, I had all those cymbals, so there's a lot of distance to cover. And also, it was almost all with sequencers, so you have to be perfectly in time. So some people will say, okay, the reason you want to keep your distances shorter is because if you have more space, there's more opportunity to like drush or drag, because so really what you have to be able to do is judge different distances, but still at the point where it's still synchronized where you want it to hit. But I've never thought about that, because to me, that's just, luckily it's worked out. So I can play with a click or anything in my sleep and always hit, and not worry that if I come this far or if I come all the way this far, that I'm going to be off a little bit.
Yeah. Were you guys using wedges during all of that, or were you?
Okay. Until the Imaginary Day tour, yes. So I had this gigantic wedge, by my hi-hat that was, had to be louder than Pat, and Pat was really loud. And, finally I put in earplugs, in my left ear. But then finally I got some in-ears. And I'll tell you a funny story. A lot of people don't know this, but I can tell it. So I got some in-ears. And so we were just about to go on the Imaginary Day tour, and we were rehearsing in Atlantic City. So I got this new drum set from DW's gorgeous kit, and I got this in-ears. So Pat's like, okay, let's play Have You Heard? So I play Have You Heard and just nail it. And he goes, yeah, it sounds great. I'm just afraid that, that you might feel outside the music. Let's do it without the in-ears for a second. Now, I know I could do the same thing, but I went, okay. And I fairly rarely ever do stuff like this, but I said, I'm just going to play like maybe 10% less accurate. So then by the time he was done, he goes, yeah, you're right. Okay, you sound better with the in-ears. And I was able to keep the in-ears, because if I had played the same way, I wouldn't have been able to do that.
Right.
But dig this, he was so used to this blasting monitor by me, he kept that going. So I had in-ears, but I still had this god-awful mechanic monitor blasting the left side, which made it really hard, for like the sound men to make me loud enough, because you got this thing blasting through, which was crazy.
That's so funny. I saw you with the band one time, and it was on that tour. I was in college at the time and drove up from Nashville to Louisville, Kentucky to see you guys up there, and man, you sounded so good.
Thanks. Well, the other thing that we added on that, I think Steve Rodby recommended this, was one of these bass vibrators, magnets under your drum throne, so that when you hit the bass drum or you hear the bass, you could feel it. And Lyle liked it so much, he actually had it put on his piano throne.
Really?
But what's really funny, luckily I beat this, but in 2017 I had prostate cancer, and I beat that, and I'm thinking, I wonder, having like this 10-pound magnet next to your under your groin for a whole year, that can't be healthy for your body,
It can't be. I didn't even think about that, but you're right. Yeah, that's a good point. That's really funny. How did you meet Steve Rodby? Because I know you're both from Chicago, is that right? I
was playing on the scene, and he was on the scene. We ended up playing with this guy, Ross Trout, who was this guitar player that was, I think he might have even been Pat's roommate down in University of Miami for a bit. But I started playing with Ross, and then I think Ross knew Steve, and then we started playing in the same bands, and we got along really well. And then remember Steve and we did Simon and Bard's first 2 records, and just one thing kind of led to another. We always just played great together. We're kind of different people. I mean, he's very, how can I put it? Well, for instance, like when I don't know if he's still doing this, because we're actually still playing together. We're in a band with this great piano player, Niels Landoki from Denmark. In fact, we have a couple gigs with Mike Stern coming up in Denmark.
Cool.
The end of August, early September. But Steve would be one of these guys that, like, he would have like a great pen, his penmanship. And I'm like, I don't care what I'm just like that. So so it's almost like he was the straight man And we've even talked about this, even in an interview once. He's almost like the straight man, and I'm the crazy guy, So he keeps me in line. We have fun together. So that's how that worked.
I don't think he was on the video, but I saw a video with you with Simon and Bard from the early 80s. It's in his recording studio.
Oh, is that the thing? Is that the thing with, what's her name? John Phillips' daughter.
Mackenzie Phillips.
Mackenzie Phillips, yeah. That's Larry Gray, actually, on bass, who I'm Wertico and Gray. We have 8 recordings together.
Yeah.
So Larry and I do a lot of things. And we just recorded with Fareed Haq a couple days, 2 10-hour sessions about 2 months ago. And he's incredible. Now, he's different than Steve. I mean, they're both incredible. Larry's like a virtuoso cellist, guitarist, flautist, pianist, he's kind of, and he's got tons of chops. I mean, he's just like, so when we play together, it's a different thing, because different people bring out different sides of you. And that's what's cool about it. If everybody brought the same way, then it would get boring. So that's why you play with different people.
Sure.
And as long as you're happy with how you feel playing with different people, it's always interesting that way. But both of them are like dear friends, since the 70s.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So I started out playing drums and percussion, but became a gigging bass player because I'm a singer as well, and I found I could get a lot of work as a singing bass player. So that's what I did. But I was curious, as a drummer and bass player, what do you look for? What do you want from a bass player on the bandstand? What kind of things do you look for?
Well, obviously, that's your partner. So you're the foundation. And especially they're the foundation because they're playing the lowest instrument. That's why a bass drum is a bass drum. Sometimes, when people say kick drum, well, it is for pop music, but it's really a bass drum. So it's the foundation up on the drum set. But what I look for, obviously, good time and feel. Because some people play in front of the beat, some play in back, some play in the middle. So I can adjust to that, and they can adjust to me. And it depends on the music, because I've been lucky enough to play with the greatest bass players in the world. And each of them kind of brings out different things in you. So, some people, if they're really precise, they might, and the music needs precision, it's almost easier to play precise with them as opposed to trying to play music that's got to be precise, but someone that's looser, because then you might play loose and then it might be a little too loose,
Right.
So, and just the fact that, if they play more notes, then I'm going to play maybe less notes because, in a sonic landscape, there's only 100% that can be filled. Like if you think of a painting or something, a blank canvas, there's only 100% that can be filled. So different times people share the amount of canvas that they're filling in. Mm-hmm. So sometimes, if I'm playing just like straight ahead, like, the $1 million beat, I like a bass player just playing $1 million groove with me, and we'll just lock in and then let everyone else fill in all the space. And intonation, obviously, too, makes a big difference because all these people I'm talking about, I'll play great time and they play in tune, obviously. But over the years, I started out when I started playing in high school, actually, I started going downtown to sit in with Barrett Deems's group. Now, Barrett Deems was this guy. He was like part of the Gene Krupa, Buddy Rich school. So he played with Louis Armstrong. He went to Africa with Louis Armstrong, and he's in he played with everybody. And he was incredibly fast. He was unbelievably fast. And so I sat in one time, and he loved my playing. So he was kind of like, even I never took a lesson, he was kind of like a mentor. So I started subbing for him even before college. So I started playing with all these older black bass players who were like 7 years old that had played with Louis Armstrong and Ellington.
Wow.
So again, it's like that song, I wish I knew what I know now when I was younger. But I was playing, I was just playing with these guys, and a lot of those guys felt to me like they were almost dragging. But when I was younger, I was probably pushing the beat, Yeah. Now you would marry this stuff. But it was real interesting. And Barrett was, he's so famous that there's a story that I think it was Gene Krupa said that Barrett makes coffee nervous. And there's these stories, him on a plane with like maybe 10 watches on each arm. And so when he died, right before he died, he was in his 80s. He was married to this girl, Jane, who was an alto sax player. She was like 40 years younger. And when he died, she asked me to take over the big band, but I was with Pat. I couldn't do it. But again, I was lucky enough that I don't come from that, I don't know, I guess the educational thing where you learn jazz only in school. That's one thing good about Chicago is you can go to school here and then go jam at night, at the clubs. But I definitely came a lot from playing, all those gigs live all those times with so many different people. And by the time I met Ross Trout and Rodby and all these people, I was already playing all these nights everywhere. And everything was a different experience. You'd have a recording session or a jingle, and then you'd play a hotel lounge, and then you'd play a wedding, and then you'd play some jazz club, and then you'd play some rock club. I mean, it was so fun back then. And I always made my style that I would play things that sort of crossed over into something else. I played with this guy, Joe Daly, who was a great sax player and great educator when I was in my 20s. And in fact, when Pat first asked me to join and play with him in the 70s, I turned Pat down because I had been with Joe Daly for 2 years, and we had this big gig coming up, the Jazz Showcase, which back then was like, it's like the Village Vanguard. So I was playing with Joe one time, and I had this band Earwax Control, and I would always do this crazy stuff. Like I had this cassette deck, and I would record stuff off of television. Like I'd record Bela Lugosi and all this stuff, and then I'd split the words up, cutting the tape to have it introduce Earwax Control. So anyway, this one night with Joe Daly, and Howard Levy was in the audience and stuff. We're playing Orphans on a Monday night, which we had this normal Monday night thing, and we're playing sort of modern, but sort of straight ahead jazz. I had taped a toilet paper commercial. And so I had my cassette deck next to me, and I didn't plan on doing this. But anyway, we started trading fours. And Joe plays this four, and then I play four, and then he does another four. And then I decided to hit the cassette deck, and the commercial came on. It went ba-da, ba-ba-da, ba-ba-doo-da-da-da. Uh-oh. And the whole audience completely lost it. Because how many people would do that on a jazz gig?
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So again, I guess I got my reputation for not being normal.
As I was saying before, growing up listening to you playing with Pat, my favorite record of yours playing on with that group was the quartet record. I thought it showed a side to you in that group that I kind of thought was missing. And it just kind of was like, oh, that's the guy for me. That's it. You sound so great on that.
Thanks. Well, that we did in a couple days. And one reason you can hear me is because there's no sequencers going.
Yeah, right.
Because I was buried in sequencers, which always, so even when I listen to those records now, I'm like, God, I couldn't even transcribe what I was playing if I had to, because I can't hear half the stuff.
Yeah, I know.
And I was just explaining, I was talking to Ed Toth, Ed Toth from, yeah. So we're friends. Actually, he took a lesson many years ago, but we're friends. And I was just explaining to him about that record, that I actually had a drum solo on that record, okay? It was about, maybe a minute and a half or 2 minutes long. But what happened is that I was with Evans Heads at the time. And Evans Heads were great, but they had a problem working with DW bass drum bearing edges. So here I'm going to play a solo, which was going to be a cool solo. And I play it, and we go back and listen to it. And I remember this happening as I was playing it. As I was playing it, the head slid off the bearing edge. So you hear the bass drum go boom, 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 blah, 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 blah. And the other guys in the band didn't really hear it, but I pointed it out, and then they were go, okay, we can't use it. So that broke my heart,
Oh, yeah.
And there was also on First Circle, I was supposed to have a drum solo, because remember I did scrap metal with the ring modulator and stuff. I actually have a tape of that too. And that was going to be, but Pat didn't put it on for some reason. We did that, and I did all my feedback and everything live, but that never made it on either. So, I mean, Pat's gig was great in so many ways, but it was also very, it was kind of restricting, because you knew It's always going to be this many courses of guitar on this song. And, you couldn't just stretch. I couldn't go and just like do a retard somewhere, that you would normally do if you're playing regular music. So it's funny because I'm so proud that I could do that kind of music and that people loved it. But it's really, I feel like it's about like, half of what, or less than half of who I am and what I do. But that's the thing about when you play different music, different types of music only require so much. So you could have the most amazing chops, but if you're playing with the Rolling Stones, that's your job. It's just to lock down the groove. And if the music's good, you're happy doing it because then you're serving the music and you're making it work. And I think when I mentioned earlier that I was doing so many gigs in Chicago, that was so fun for me. So if I played a wedding, I was never bored on a wedding because I knew later on that night or tomorrow I could do my bash with, and so my job on a wedding, okay, let me get that dance floor packed and keep it packed, So I think a big thing with understanding our role as drummers and musicians in general is what does the music really require? How much of you, even though you're putting in 100%, you're putting in maybe 100% of maybe 10% here, 100% of 80%, sometimes 100% of 100%, like with Wertico, Kane and Gray. That's totally improvised. That's 100% of 100%. But it's really keeps life interesting because it's never the same, ever.
I tell everyone that I came to you through the group, but I stayed for everything else because you're playing, I think it's, and I don't want to get too opinionated about it, but I feel it's a travesty that most of the people don't know you as the guy who played all this other stuff. Because man, you're just such a deep player, and I'm sure it was a tough thing working after that group because you were probably kind of typecast, I guess is the best word for it.
Well, I've talked about this with other people where it's like an actor. You think of Fred Gwynne from the Munsters, and he's in other things where he was in Car 54 before that, but you always think of like what they're most famous at, right? But in reality, you look at the world, we're so lucky to have any recognition at all. So it's to be in a band that sells that many records and I guess has that much positive meaning for so many people, that's a blessing in a lot of ways. Sure. That we actually did something. Because think of how many people out there have tons of chops or, have tons of talent that never get heard at all. So it's really hard to complain about anything, really, especially like our lives, like say you and I, where there's people starving to death right now, or it's just, there's so many things that we've won the lottery in so many ways. And so, yeah, it's frustrating in some ways to think that people don't know that other side of me, but, maybe they will. And if they don't, it was not meant to be. So,
yeah, well, to anyone listening to this, please go check out more stuff. It's so good. I want to talk to you about your teaching career because I find it really interesting that you didn't take formal lessons growing up, but you've amassed this really long teaching career, and I think it's really I think it's a testament to you. I think you're maybe a lifelong learner and then transferring that information on to other people. What was the catalyst for you becoming a teacher?
At a university, for instance?
At a university, for example, yeah.
Again, totally accidental. So I had been teaching privately for, a long time. And like I said, I was teaching at music stores when I was 15. But one time, because of, again, playing with Pat, so that would be one of the benefits, I got asked to do a clinic at University of Wisconsin in Appleton. And so it was one of those kind of days of percussion. I don't know if it was a basic thing or not. But anyway, so I did my thing. And then two of the other people that were clinicians were Patsy Dash and Jim Ross from Chicago Symphony Orchestra. Yeah. And they were also teaching at Northwestern. So they go, Paul, we love what you're doing. You should come and teach at Northwestern. And I went, well, I'm touring a lot. And they said, no, you could just be, adjunct or whatever. I sure. So all of a sudden I got that gig. And then I'm doing that, it's going, 10, 12, 13. All of a sudden, then I'm doing a PAS, Illinois PAS thing at Roosevelt University. And Ed Harrison, who is still teaching there, he was also doing a clinic there. So he goes, Paul, you should teach here. And I was like, okay, So there I'm adjunct at both schools for a while, which you can do. And so at one point, I think after maybe 2 years or maybe, just a couple years, I went up to the dean at Chicago College of Performing Arts at Roosevelt University, and I just said hey, if you're ever interested in me doing more, not thinking about that, but just maybe more. She goes, well, what about a full-time position? I was like,
okay.
So about a year later, all of a sudden, I met with the dean of the school and everything, and they offered me this position, and I said, well, can it be tenure track? Because sometimes people, you can teach there at a school for 30 years, but you always got to be reappointed every few years. Mm-hmm. And so I went the tenure track route. Now, once I got hired full-time at Roosevelt, you can't be full-time somewhere and teach somewhere else because, because then Northwestern would be using my name to attract students to Northwestern.
Right.
So I went to Northwestern. I said, I have to leave. And they were no problem. They said, like, if you were full-time here, which I found out later they would have had me do. I didn't even realize that. They said, yeah, you wouldn't be able to teach at the other place either. So then just kind of one thing just led to another. So again, I have no idea how I got to all this stuff. I mean, it's just been really one lucky life.
Are you teaching a lot of classes? Do you have a lot of private students? What does that look like?
Kind of both. I mean, I don't have to go down there every day. That's one thing too. So, which is really nice. But I have 2 ensembles. So, this semester I'm teaching the avant-garde ensemble. So we're doing like stuff by Albert Ayler and all that, which is great. It sounds great. And then because I was head of jazz for 5 years, but then I just didn't want to do that. That's, the administrative stuff gets too so I just wanted to teach. I came up with like a whole genre-specific combo program back when I was head of jazz. Rather than beginning jazz, you'd have, an ECM combo and a hard bop combo and stuff. So I came up this year, they wanted me to teach the bebop or hard bop combo again. And I said, no, let's do a blues combo. So yesterday, for instance, we did the blues combo and the avant-garde combo rehearsals. And the blues combo, we're working on Albert King stuff and T-Bone Walker stuff. And the kids love it because one thing those songs, Stormy Monday or Born Under a Bad Sign, kids should learn all that stuff.
Absolutely.
Those are standards. And a lot of jazz programs, it's only about bebop and big band. And our stuff it's much more open-ended to neo soul and everything, as well as I teach the swing combo and all that stuff. So I do that. I've got a number of students. They're all good. One student from Indonesia who is a sophomore, he's ridiculous, and he absorbs everything. I feel like he's a mini me now. It's almost like, seriously, he's got incredible technique, but he does all the crazies. He'll just take something and he'll just run with it. And he knows so much about the music. So you get these certain students that even turn you on to certain things. And then I've got a couple classes. I've got an asynchronous class which I came up with called The Power of Black American Music. And then I'm teaching a Jazz Essentials 1 class, which is a jazz history class. And then I'm teaching Understanding Rhythm section. So,
oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So in that one, I'm teaching kids to understand what the rhythm sections do, but then expose them to the famous, Muscle Shoals and the Wrecking Crew and, the Stax people and Motown. And because a lot of kids, when I was growing up, when I was in college, jazz was 50 years old. Now it's 100 years old. Motown was happening. Motown is 60 years old now. So kids, you can't expect them to know about everything. So when they can learn it in schools, they understand not only this music that either they knew or did know, but also, because our school is also a social justice-based school, I teach them the cultural correlations, society, and how it's important in society, and why this music even came into being. So, for instance, like with the blues music, I mean, blues was like the newspaper for African Americans for years. Back in, if you go, there's a great podcast called Uncensored History of the Blues. It's all these blues things before World War II, and they're all topical. So it might be the Furniture Man blues, where the guy comes and repossesses your furniture, and there's songs about that, or lesbian blues, or cocaine blues, or the Mississippi Flood of 1927 blues, and that's how a lot of the stories got told to other people. And so in a lot of ways, music, including rock and roll, including jazz in a lot of ways, and rap too, tells the story of what's happening in people's lives through music, where newspapers might not even care about that. So that's the way I kind of approach it. So this keeps me down the rabbit hole. I mean, I'm always looking for new stuff and learning new stuff about stuff I knew about, but now I know more about it.
Man, I bet that's an engaging class for your students. I'm sure they really eat that content up.
Yeah.
The last couple of minutes, I want to ask you about, I've taken a deep dive listening to this fairly new record of yours, the Drums Without Boundaries, Paul Wertico's Drums Without Boundaries. I love it. I think it's a beautiful recording, and your playing is outstanding. I was just curious how that project happened.
Okay, here's another story. Okay, well, I have 4 bands in Italy. So I have the Paul Wertico Trio with this great piano player, Fabrizio Moccata, who I just talked to today, because I think we're going to be playing in maybe New York and Buenos Aires soon. And then great bass player, Gianmarco Scalia. Now, Gianmarco's in like the other band. So I've got a band with John Hellowell, sax player from Supertramp. We have a quartet. And make a real long story as short as I can. What happened with Gianmarco is that a couple years ago, he did a record he wanted me to be on called Dynamics and Meditation. And so we went and we recorded this in a day and a half. And it had a vibe player named Mirko Penbrody and a guitar player. So we recorded that. I helped put it together too. So long story short, all of a sudden Mirko, who's really great, he's a great improviser and classical percussionist, he says, Paul, there's this percussion ensemble, Ichos Percussion. I'd like you to do a record with them. And I say, sure, because I'm game for anything, right? So they put together this thing where I'm going to go, this was 2 years ago, I guess, in the summer. We're going to go record this album. Gianmarco's going to play on it. Mirko's going to play. And they got a different guitar player, this great guitar player, Alex Monk from England. So we book a 3-week tour. Most of it is my piano trio, because we're playing one-nighters everywhere. So I land, and the first 2 nights we do the piano trio thing in a couple different cities. Now, the next day, Gianmarco drives me up to this small city where Ichos Percussion has their warehouse. So I walk in, and there's like this big warehouse with all this percussion. It's like, this is great. Now, one thing, it's like 105 degrees. This is like when the rivers are drying up and everything. So I walk in this warehouse, it's air conditioned. Okay, great. So we have like 3 days to do this record. Now, we've never played together. First of all, one of the 5 guys from Ichos isn't there because he's got COVID, so they've got his sub. Now, and the engineer, who's really good, speaks English really well, he's sick too, but he says he doesn't have COVID. So we set up in the round. So I'm thinking, how are we going to do this then? Because we've never played this music before. And if someone makes a mistake, how are you going to punch in? Because it's going to bleed into everything. So anyway, I get my drum sound, first of all, and the drums sound great. I'm happy. And everyone gets their sound. And then we start playing the first tune, which is this mixed meter thing. And I'm hearing in my headphones, I'm hearing my drums go, brr, 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 brr. And I'm like, oh my God, it's the latency. So all the mics, like the timpani's 60 feet away and the marimbas are 70. So I'd say, okay, we can't do this. this way, because the project is called Alchimia Project, meaning gold, and because one of the tunes is called Alchimia, and it's featuring me as a guest artist, right? So I say, this is what we're going to do. I go in my production mode because I love producing records. I say we're gonna play with click. We're going to stagger our stuff. We're going to have, and so we start playing and we do the first tune, and everyone's really good. So everyone's really cooperative. So we get that first piece done. Now, the thing is, we have to end by like dinner time because the engineer, he has this thing where I guess he can only work 8 hours a day. So we're done. We go out for dinner, and then we go to the hotel. It's this great hotel, get some rest. Now, the next morning, I wake up like 3 a.m. because my room's like 95 degrees. So my air conditioning's not working. And we have this 9 o'clock lobby call. So we go down and we start working on another tune. Get it done. Great. Another tune. Okay, we're doing really well. They wanted to play one tune, but I didn't like it. I said, no. So anyway, we get up to like 30, maybe 35 minutes, 40 minutes. And they're like, oh, no, the label won't release it unless it's 60 minutes. And I'm like, what? And we've got like maybe one day to do the rest of this stuff.
Oh, dear.
So I say, here's what we're going to do. Luckily I had my Mac with me, and I had my, the iMusic, and I had waveforms of stuff off of my other records. So 5 of those things, 3 of them were from Stereo Nucleus, one from Wertico came Windows of Time, and another one from Free the Opera, which was Fabrizio Makata and Gianmarco Scalia. And I said, put it in, put it in Pro Tools. I'm going to tell you what to play and how. And so I just conducted it. So all of a sudden we kind of get this done, right? And this is great. So now we're kind of up to like, almost 50 minutes. But again, we have to go out for dinner. So we go out, and the guy from Ichos gives me their former CD, which has some John Cage pieces, which, I was familiar with John Cage, but not these pieces. So anyway, long story short, we go, and now we have like a half day to record because we have a concert that night. So I get up the next day. Now my room, they fixed air conditioning, but it's like 50 degrees. So I'm starting to get sick now. Okay.
Oh, no.
I've got a sore throat, and I'm going, uh-oh. So we get to the studio, and I said, here's what we're going to do. And without ever hearing it, I say, I see Third Construction is like 11 minutes long. I'm going to play a brush solo up front, then just put it on. I have no music, nothing. I'm just going to play over it, which I did, one take, no edits or anything. And that's how we got up to 60 minutes.
No kidding. Well, that was funny. I was going to ask you about the Third Construction track. I played that piece when I was in college, and I loved your choices on it. And I was asking you about the process of recording that piece, but it's really cool.
So I just jammed over it. So then the rest of actually that first night that we were going to play, we got rained out because we were supposed to play outside this beautiful castle, and we got rained out. So next day we have one more show we have to play in Florence. So we stopped at a pharmacy, and they gave me some throat lozenges and stuff. And they say, oh, by the way, don't test for COVID because you don't want to know. I was like, oh, great. So anyway, we played the show in Florence, so it went great. And since we didn't have enough material, I actually gave the sound man for the whole rest of the tour the 5 pieces of mine, and then we jammed over those live, even with the piano trio, which was really cool. And let me tell you about the rest of this with the record. So anyway, I think I'm done. I haven't signed a contract or anything. It's like I just have been doing what I do. And all of a sudden, the sound man starts sending me mixes of certain things for me to like go and like, okay, do this and do that. And things are going good. And all of a sudden I hear from the president of the label, who is Italian, but the label's based in Osaka, Japan. He's going, well, we can't use Windows of Time because he thinks it's electronic drums. And I said, no, it's just prepared drum set. And he goes, okay, we can use it. But he was worried about the Cage piece again. So I said, well, let me take care of this. So I go online and I look for the John Cage Trust, and I contact them and I say, well, I played over this thing. and they go, well, send us a mix of it, which I did. And I get back from the publisher. He loves it. He sends it to the head. They go, just use it. And Ed Harrison, who's, the guy I mentioned earlier, he has played that many times too. He was blown away by the whole thing. So anyway, to get back to the rest of this story on this, the label guy says, okay, we can do this, but he hates the name Alchimia Project. I say, well, okay. So he sent me like 3 other names, but they're like a combination of Latin and German. I mean, it's like and I said, no one's going to be able to pronounce this, let alone know what it means. He goes, okay, well, send me some other ideas. So I sent him like 30 other names, anything I could come up with. One of them was like Drums Without Boundaries, Drums Without Borders, Paul Wertico's. So all of a sudden now it comes back and it's Paul Wertico's Drums Without Boundaries. I'm like, yeah, okay, since I did put this whole thing together anyway. And then he sends me the artwork. Now there's 3 different covers that I had to choose from. And this one was just the one. It was just, it's so beautiful. And then he sends me, he asks for any other information on who played on it and all this stuff. So I do all that work. And then he sends me the artwork with the graphics and everything. Now, the one problem is that John Mulder, my guitar player, it left out the R. It said John Mulder. So I said, okay, you have to fix this, because on Ichos's previous record, they had 2 typos on there. They had third constructio, they left out the N, and first construction or something. So I said, you have to fix the R. Now, as long as you're doing it, please there was some space on the paper where I said, well, please just say Paul Wertico wants to thank all the great musicians and the John Cage Thrust for their support, right? So I get the thing back, the R is fixed. And then it says, Paul Wertico wants to, just wanted to thank everyone for. It's like, no, the sentence. So then I'm saying, man, where's the second sentence? He says, it's there. I say, no, it's not. So finally he fixes it, and then life is good. And then there's the release date, which was the last date, like in July last year. And it came out, and it's gotten great reviews, but it hasn't been reviewed. Like, it was never reviewed in Modern Drummer. And plus it's on the classical label. So Da Vinci has a classics and a Da Vinci jazz. They didn't put it on the jazz label. They put it on the classical label. So I think it's only gotten 3 reviews, which breaks my heart, because it's really one of my favorite things I've ever done. And I've had people like, Glenn Cochee loved it. Peter Martin, the guys from Third Coast Percussion, all those guys were my students. They loved it. Mike Clark wrote to me. He goes, 10 stars. Peter Magadini, before he died, he goes, Paul, it was, man, but no one's heard this thing, really. It breaks my heart. Where with Metheny, you knew that as soon as that record's going to come out, at least 200,000 people are going to be able to hear this thing.
Yeah.
So, like, your point about that, sometimes it gets frustrating. But again, hopefully it'll get out there. And if it doesn't, wasn't meant to happen. Well,
I'm going to find a way to get that in Modern Drummer. It's going to be my life's mission for someone to write about it, because it's a wonderful, wonderful release, man. It's so good.
And isn't it a funny story? Because most people thought that we rehearsed and all this stuff. It was not. This was like flying by the side of your pants. I mean, if I hadn't done this, and even the guitar player wrote, he said, man, great job. This wouldn't have happened without you. And I'm not trying to be an ego thing. It's just those guys were all willing to work together. We're all great musicians. They wanted to get the thing done too. And I just kind of went into that mode where we're all going to work together. Just please listen to my suggestions. And luckily they were good suggestions for what the final product was,
Well,
crazy.
It's, and I've listened to as many things with your name on as I've been able to, and it's near the top of the list for me, maybe at the top of the list. I just love the approach to it, and just the way the ensemble plays together. And what your choices on it were really, really wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the idea too. Even Glenn Cochee would say, Paul, you should be doing stuff with percussion ensembles everywhere. I mean, I am playing with a percussion thing now in April in Texas at a high school. They just called me. But I would love to be going to Japan and stuff and playing, because the idea of improvising over even written pieces would be great, because that opens up the space, because everything is, even a written piece is improvised, except the person's improvising on paper and it turns into something that has to be played a certain way. So I would love to do that, because I love percussion, and I love the adventure of taking something and making it slightly different. So my brush solo was just an intro, but the way I played the brushes through was sort of this horizontal flowing thing that I guess in retrospect, I was just trying to make everything flow horizontally, where a lot of the percussion things were sort of vertical, and angular.
Yeah, and in that piece too, I mean, there are so many different rhythms happening vertically, and yeah, to find something that flows through that, it's it can be a challenge. Like I said, your choices were just so wonderful for that track.
Thanks, Brad.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Well, Paul, I just can't thank you enough for your time today. This has been a real pleasure getting to hang out and speak with you and hear these great stories.
Yeah, Brad, hopefully you get to hang out sometime, if you're ever up in the area. Good luck.
Thank you.
Stay safe, and yeah, keep grooving.
That's it. Thanks, Paul.
All right.
Thanks for listening to the Bandwich Tapes. I'm your host, Brad Williams. The show's theme is called Placation and was written by Mark Mundy. Drop me a line at the email address, thebandwichtapes@gmail.com. Make sure to subscribe to receive new episodes of the podcast. And while you're at it, please tell someone else about the show. Thanks for listening.